Mr. Tejas, do we have any public comment this morning?
We've not received any.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is adoption of minutes for the CRRMA board meeting of May 7th, 2015.
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Minutes are adopted. Before we go into the meat of our agenda, we have a special guest today. The Texas Department of Transportation, David Plutowski, is here. He is the RMA coordinator. Would you stand? Welcome. I understand that you have been working with us since the inception of the RMA here, so you have great historical knowledge. So look forward to picking your brain at some time down the road. Thank you for being here, and I know that Raymond gave him a tour yesterday of some of our projects and brought him up to speed. Next item on the agenda is discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute an interlocal agreement with the City of El Paso as it relates to the use of city resources to manage the Tornillo Guadalupe Port of Entry. Mr. Tejas.
Good morning. Raymond Tejas, Executive Director of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority. So this first item that we're starting off with deals with, as the board chair read into the record, it deals with an interlocal agreement with the City of El Paso. As you may recall, we had entered into an agreement with the County of El Paso as it relates to their Tornillo Guadalupe Port of Entry. Specifically, we'd actually entered into two separate agreements. The first agreement was to assist them in the planning, design, and installation of their toll collection system at the Tornillo Port of Entry. And that was completed and that is in place. The second agreement, which was executed, I believe, at the last board meeting, actually was an operations agreement. The county asked the RMA to operate the toll collection system that we implemented for them prior. So we've entered into that agreement. However, the intent of the agreement was really for the RMA to utilize the existing and available expertise of the City of El Paso's Bridge Division employees to operate the Tornillo Port of Entry. So what you're seeing under item 4 here is the associated agreement, interlocal agreement between the RMA and the City of El Paso, which actually gives us access to the City of El Paso's personnel so that they can operate the Tornillo Port of Entry for us. So that's what you have before you. And I guess subject to your questions, I'll go through very generally. There's, of course, the agreement spells out the details. The Exhibit A really gets into the specifics of the staffing resources. We're looking at various bridge administrative and management folks, the toll collection supervisor, senior cashier, senior toll collector, and then junior toll collectors under that. So, and you'll see the breakout of the individuals that will be providing the services. So, and as you will note, the budget established within the interlocal with the City of El Paso as well, within the budget established by the County of El Paso, since the county funds will flow through the RMA to the city's employees. So, subject to your questions, I would recommend approval of this item. And I'd mentioned this one is important because once it's executed, the City of El Paso will actually go out with a job fair for individuals specifically to be assigned to Tornillo, in addition to the folks that they're already intending to provide at the facility.
Raymond, how many staff, sorry.
No, go ahead.
How many staff will we have out there, just in total?
One moment and I'll find that for you.
There was a couple of part-timers and
I believe it's 12, and I'll ask Greg Blake from our general engineering consultant team to confirm or correct me, but I believe it's 12 individuals. And the way that this is structured, it's a not to exceed. So we've structured it in the event that the toll facility is working 7 days a week, significant hours and that sort of thing. So we'll actually pull down only the individuals that we actually need, but. That helped.
Mr. Blake, good morning.
Good morning, Board. Greg Blake with the General Engineering Consultant. The way we did that estimate, as Raymond mentioned, was to look at all 3 lanes, dual shifts of both lanes, which with the traffic that's envisioned out there, it's not likely to occur for some years. But that was to establish that not to exceed budget. If you look at that staffing level, it's 6 full-time collectors, 4 part-time, and then you have I think the org chart shows you a senior cashier, a plaza manager, and a senior toll collector to manage those individuals. So that's 13 individuals, I believe, from the city.
Okay.
And what are the hours at the bridge?
6 a.m. to 10 p.m., I believe, 7 days a week.
Mr. Tez, I saw, did you want to speak?
Yes, absolutely.
I just have a question. You show that the opening date in the agreement is currently identified as August 15th of this year? Is that realistic? Or
We're hearing different things from the state. So where that date actually comes from is it comes from the interlocal agreement with the County of El Paso. And the initial intent was for an opening in August 15th. And that was established by the State Department working with Mexico and the state of Texas and all of those entities that are involved in the actual federal components. We've been told by the county within this week that has slipped some. But we're still trying to get all of our agreements signed so that we can do the job fair and all that sort of thing from the city side, because those are long lead items. So we want to get all of that done, and we'd rather have them ready to go than waiting on us. So long way to answer your question. I think in the end, the start date will likely slip from the August 15th, but that is the last official date that we've received.
okay. Ms. Yanner, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I just had a question about how much administration, Raymond, this involves on your part. Who's scheduling the employees? Who's kind of doing all that? There seems like a lot of work involved. I understand the city's going to provide the employees, but how does that work in terms of the RMA oversight of that?
Right. So the RMA, my role is limited because of the fact that we will actually use a general engineering consultant to do the most of the management. So, and that's, as you notice, when it came time to ask how many individuals and hours and that sort of thing, I asked for Greg Blake to come up. So that's where you see the management really coming in. I'll do the oversight of the GEC contract and the general work with the county and the city and those types. So we've built in, and I would have to go back. I don't think I have it. We've built in an amount to pay for my administrative time, and I believe we budgeted about, I'd hate to guess. If you'd like, I can get back to you with that number and the amount that we are charging the county for my services.
Okay. And then, of course, the engineers will be passed through as well.
100%, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Are there any further questions on item 4? Entertain a motion to approve. We have a motion
Second.
and a second. There being no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes. Item number 5 is discussion and action on board resolutions establishing the scoring criteria and authorizing the issuance of requests for proposals for the janitorial services for the Tornillo Guadalupe Port of Entry, B, security guard services for the Tornillo Guadalupe Port of Entry, C, operation of the El Paso Bike Share Program, and D, audit services for the CRRMA. Mr. Tejas.
Thank you. So for this item, I'll ask IT to bring up we've got a PowerPoint for this item. So as was read into the record, we have several procurements that are going to be issued here soon, so I figured I would roll them into a single PowerPoint for you all. And obviously stop me as we go through each of these items. And at the back end, I'll ask for motions to approve the issuances of these various procurements. So as mentioned, we're talking about janitorial and security guard services for Tornillo, bike share program operations, and the annual audit services. So first up, the Tornillo Port of Entry. As we discussed under the last item, we have an agreement with the County of El Paso whereby the RMA agreed to do various day-to-day operational, provide day-to-day operational services to the county. Included within there, obviously, are the toll collection services, but also we retained the janitorial and security services at the request of the County of El Paso. So because the RMA does not have those services available to us, we will have to go out for a procurement for those two services. We've received sample RFPs from other similar public agencies, and we use those as the basis for the proposed RFPs. So with janitorial services, here's some general details about each of the procurements that we'll be issuing. The county has requested 7-day coverage, and this goes to the operating hours, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. They're looking at, in addition to that, weekly, monthly, and semi-annual deeper cleans where the staff would come in and do a little more than day-to-day cleaning. And we're looking at a 36-month term with 2 optional 1-year extensions. And that matches our agreement with the county. Security guard services is similar, but 24/7 coverage is requested by the county. The officers would be licensed, they'd have training courses, and they would be bilingual and, of course, physically fit. 36-month term again with 2 optional 1-year extensions. As mentioned before under the other item, both janitorial and security guard services would be reimbursed to the RMA by the county at 100%. This is the proposed timeline for the RFP. Mid to late June, we would issue the RFP. We'd have a question and answer period. Questions would be due late June. By early July, we would provide responses. The proposals would then be due in mid-July, and the contract award we're anticipating for mid to late July. We have a couple of items that are floating right now, so I may unfortunately have to ask you all for a special meeting in July, in which case this procurement would fall in there. The proposed RFP scoring for this particular procurement, price proposal at 80% and experience and qualifications at 20%. And this is in line with recent City of El Paso and other similarly situated entities.
Mr. Tez, I have a question on that. Since we are using the city's bridge department, would it be improper for us to utilize their existing security service contracts and their existing janitorial services rather than go out to go through a complete new bid process? It's just a question.
Oh, absolutely, and it makes sense, and that's partly what we're trying to do with these services. We're trying to make them more efficient. We asked the City of El Paso, unfortunately, their procurement that they've done for their janitorial and security guard services wouldn't allow for someone to be brought in to work out in Tornillo.
Okay.
So we tried that. That was honestly, actually, the first option was asking the county to use their existing services because all of these entities have these services. Their procurement was similarly tight in the way that they do it, so they couldn't, they wouldn't have somebody available for Tornillo. Same with the City of El Paso, so we're having to do it ourselves.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so that, and these timelines are for both janitorial and security guard services, even though they'll be distinct procurements. Same scoring proposed for both as well. So bike share, this one has a little more background because we haven't really talked about bike share in some time. So I wanted to share a little more detail with you all. And of course with this one, stop me again as we go through it if you have any questions. So as you may recall, the El Paso Metropolitan Planning Organization awarded $720,000 to the Camino Real RMA to serve as the implementing agency for the El Paso Bike Share program. When they awarded the $720,000, they identified the program as a phase 1, and the intent there really was going back. The original program that went through the MPO was a $2 million program. It was cut back through various procedural issues at the MPO and with TxDOT. So when it came back as a smaller program, they identified it as a phase 1 with the intention that everybody understood additional funding would be identified later to expand the program. The federal, or the sources of funds include $320 in federal funds, $276,000 in Rider 8 funds from the state, $100,000 from the City of El Paso, and $24,000 comes from UTEP, specifically from the Student Government Council, who has a fund to provide towards green type projects. They do environmental projects, and they found the bike share to be very interesting. So they have provided $24,000 to us. This phase 1, because of the language that was included in the MPO language, results in the initial system including 80 bikes and 8 stations, and we'll talk about where those are going to go. But it's important to note too that we are actually currently going after, the MPO has a call for projects right now, and we're asking for an additional $200,000 for us to begin phase 2. And the reason I mention that here is the 80 bikes and 8 stations really needs to be tweaked in terms of how many bikes go in each station. The current industry standard is about 2 docks per 1 bike. So the 80 to 8 doesn't really work out. So we're going to rebalance the system once the second phase comes in with the additional 200,000. So these are the proposed station locations. There are 6 in downtown El Paso. There's one here at City Hall. There's one in San Jacinto Plaza. There's one at the Downtown Transfer Center on Santa Fe near the bridge. There's one in the Union Plaza Entertainment District. There's one at the History Museum near the ballpark. And there's one at the Community College, the Rio Grande campus. And 2 on the UTEP campus, one at Glory Road. And you'll notice this was a tweak. We've been meeting with the stakeholders, including Community College, University of Texas El Paso, the bike groups, and certainly the City of El Paso and other interested parties. And we met yesterday, in fact, in anticipation of today's visit from the vendor. And I'll talk about the vendor versus the operator here in a moment. But the vendor is coming in today to do site inspections for the proposed locations. So we met with all those stakeholders yesterday as a final blessing, making sure that UTEP sites were where they wanted them, community colleges were where they wanted them, the City of El Paso was okay with each of the locations we're placing on their facilities, and everything went fairly smoothly, with the exception of the UTEP camp, and I say this was smooth as well, but UTEP has changed their mind. This second bullet here, you'll notice, is a station at the Library Wiggins area. That originally was proposed for the Centennial Plaza near the Liberal Arts facility. So they've moved that, and they think that this would be a better site. So today we're actually taking the vendor to do the inspections today with the UTEP folks, and we'll walk the Wiggins area, and we'll identify the best spot. And in fact, we're doing that for all 8 sites today. So this is where I want to talk a little bit about the vendor versus the operator. The vendor is an entity named B-Cycle, and they're actually the group that does bike share programs throughout the entire state. There's a B-Cycle program in San Antonio, Fort Worth, Austin, and Houston, and many others in development. You may have heard McAllen is rolling one out, and they're using B-Cycle as well. So, and that's important because once you are a member of the B-Cycle program, you'll receive a card, and you use that card to swipe at the station, and you can check your bike out. Once you have that card, you can, because of a reciprocity agreement that we've included in our relationship with B-Cycle, you'll actually be able to use the El Paso B-Cycle card at any of the B-Cycle stations, whether they're in Texas or in Denver or anywhere else that they operate. So it's a nice function. Again, 23 major cities with many more on the way. So that's the vendor. The vendor actually provides us with the bikes, the stations, the kiosks, the touchpads. So all of the equipment necessary to run the system they provide up front, and we're purchasing that with the funds provided by the MPO, about $400,000. That leaves us about $320,000 for initial operations and maintenance. So that gets to really what we're looking for in terms of this RFP. So we're looking for an operator to rebalance the system. So for example, if we have a station here at City Hall and there's an event at the ballpark, all of the bikes are going to leave City Hall and they're all going to be piled up at the ballpark. So you need somebody to be able to pick up the excess bikes and rebalance the system. So that's a big component of the operation of it. In addition, when somebody has a problem with the kiosk, they need somebody to call, so we have those folks as part of the operation system. The people that are picking up the bikes and doing maintenance on them, they're cleaning it, they're maintaining it, they're fixing flats, all of that sort of thing is included in this RFP. So that's how you break it out. You've got the vendor providing all of the equipment, the capital equipment. You've got the operator who's actually running the system. And then you have the RMA is the entity which actually owns everything. So a little bit more about the program. Users can check out a bike, and I did this a little bit out of order, so I apologize for that. But users check out a bike through annual memberships or 24-hour memberships at the stations or online. In fact, there's an app that you can get on your phone that identifies, and you can pull up any city that they're operating in. You can pull up all of the map locations in your city, in El Paso by way of example. When you touch on a particular station, it'll tell you how many bikes are available, and more importantly, how many docks are available. Because if all the docks are full, then you can't go to that station. So that's available to you. So you can check it out by online or at the station. And at the station, you can swipe your credit card for a 24-hour pass, or you can have that annual membership, the card, where you can swipe and you'll be able to check it out. Now, keep in mind, too, this is a bike share program. It's not a bike rental program. So the distinction is In a bike share program, you've got 30-minute blocks. So the intention is very similar to parking meters. You want turnover. So you have, once you check a bike out, say, for example, you use the 24-hour period and you swipe your credit card. So for a 24-hour period, you can check that a bike out from any station for a 30-minute block, and you're covered within the payment that you've made. However, if you go over that 30-minute block, then it starts charging you again for periods that you've held over past the 30 minutes. And again, the intention is you want to take the bike out, but you want it checked back in. You want that turnover. Through annual memberships, works about the same. You've got the annual membership, you'll swipe, and you'll check it out for a block of time. So all of those details are being worked out now in terms of 30-minute block, how much for the 24-hour period, how much for the annual membership. And of course, all of that will come to the board for final approval before we roll out the program. And the program, actually, I should mention here, will actually be implemented in August, so we'll be operating before the end of the summer. So the bikes themselves will have lights, reflectors, kickstands, baskets, and locks. And the stations, as I mentioned, are configurable. Each of them have maps, touchscreens, and will be solar powered for the most part. There are a couple of locations that we're looking at, by way of example, at the San Jacinto Plaza, which is a clear choice for our community. The city has actually run electricity to it, so that won't be a solar powered facility. As I mentioned, memberships allow access to all other participating B-cycle programs. So that, in a nutshell, and please, again, stop me if you have any additional questions.
I have a couple of questions. So am I assuming improperly that you will have to have a credit card to participate in the program?
That's correct.
And
And
I'm
that's
just
important for us, because if somebody doesn't check it back in ever, we need a way to get access to the funds to cover the bike. The
Okay,
bikes will actually have and I apologize, I keep speaking over
no,
you.
go ahead, that's all
Because
right.
I'm anticipating there's a lot of these questions that I've heard before. So I think the second component of that is that each bike will have active GPS, so we'll be able to trace the bike if it goes missing.
Okay, and then the only other question is, I'm curious, and maybe this has been covered before, but I don't recollect, and for the other members of the board, what's a 30-minute block bike rental, the range of cost for something like that?
Usually, so San Antonio is on the high side. I think the average is right around $6 for a 24-hour period.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Question.
Mr. Parker?
Several questions. One, I'm certain you looked at the population of our city and realized that a large number of the potential users of this program may not have credit cards. Is there a way around that?
We've not identified one, simply because of the fact that when you go with cash, you really put the system at more risk than you do when you have a card tied back.
Well, and that leads into my second question. Do these bicycles have devices on them that enable them to be located when they go missing?
Yes. So each of them. So the current versions that are out there throughout the state, the 23 B-cycle programs that are in place right now have passive GPS. So which means basically when you're out riding, it's not monitoring you. It only, once you check it into a station, then it sends the information from where it was and where it ended up. So from there you can figure out generally where it went. That's the passive approach. We've asked for active GPS, which they will be implementing on ours, so that you can actually track in real time where that bike is at any time. And that's important for two reasons. One is obviously security, to make sure that if the bike is heading, I should say, if the bike has gone somewhere and it never checked back in, we will know where it is. So that's important from a security standpoint. The other point, and really this is more from the MPO standpoint, they're interested in seeing where the bikes are going, and certainly the city of El Paso is too, in terms of placement of bike routes and that sort of thing. So they're interested in seeing what the routes are that the bikers are using. So for those two reasons, we're opting for that active GPS.
I'm sorry, Mr. Parker.
No, thank you.
My only concern, Mr. Tejas, having dealt with GPS systems in another transportation-related industry, they're great as long as the thieves don't cut them off,
Absolutely.
as they do on over-the-road equipment. So you can locate GPS devices thrown in ditches on both sides of the border, okay? Because the people have gotten a lot more sophisticated in understanding the systems in order to game the system. We need to be cognizant, and I would really like to hear from the vendor on the type of GPS system and if it's going to be hidden in the frame or
It
not,
is.
something that will
It's-
be easy identifiable.
Yeah, so the way that I understand it, in fact, both passive and active are built into the frame. They're not easily removed, so you'd have to
Okay.
really get in there. Not to say that it couldn't happen. Now, obviously, there are folks that are interested in doing things, right? So it certainly could be an issue for us. But looking across the country at all of the different not only B-cycle but bike share programs, theft is really not a significant issue. At least we're not seeing that now. So I've actually gone and visited the B-cycle stations in Austin, San Antonio, and Fort Worth, and the rate of theft really is not significant. So we're hopeful that we will continue with that pattern. I think the active GPS along with the credit card required, I think those two will help us.
Mr. Tez, I need somebody for my team. My PC decided it was going to update itself and knock me out of the system. So
Okay.
if somebody's available to come forward.
Question.
Ms. Nair?
Raymond, are these bikes going to be insured? I mean, much like you would insure your vehicle if they're stolen or damaged, is there a possibility that, I think we have different issues maybe on the border than a city like Austin would, so is that an alternative?
It is, and we've talked about it. So that would be an operational decision that we can bring back to you, but we're seeing insurance in the programs. I'd have to get back to you on if you're seeing the individual bikes insured. So the bikes themselves cost about $1,000, and really you're not seeing theft because these are not bikes that you're going to see stolen and ridden around town, right? They're very unique.
Okay.
They're very heavy. And I say that not because it's a bad thing. It's because these are really intended to get you from one side of downtown to the other side of downtown. You're not going to see these out on the highway or you know what I mean. It's not a pleasure ride. It's not a kind of a Sunday afternoon ride. This is really about commuting, getting folks. A really good example of a use for this program is in a component that includes what's referred to as virtual kiosks. So what you'll do, like by way of example, when you have a game at the ballpark, City Hall parking is free. Nobody parks over here because I guess 3 or 4 blocks is too far to walk, but it's a really easy ride. So what we'll likely do is we'll bring in a virtual kiosk, and that really amounts to an individual from the operator group with a square or something on their phone, lined up with bikes here in this parking lot. They can come and park for free. You swipe, you get a bike, and then you ride over to the ballpark. At the ballpark, you have another individual over there with another virtual kiosk, and you can swipe your bike in at that point. After the game, you ride it back, so you basically parked for free, and you've ridden a couple of minutes, and you got to your destination. So that's really the goal of a program like this. But I think I went a little off target.
No,
but
that's actually really interesting. And then I have one more question, if you don't mind. On the scoring criteria, you did 30% the approach, 30% experience, and 40% cost. Can you tell me a little bit about why you selected it that way? Generally, we see experience and cost at 80-20. Why is this different?
So this one's different for a couple of reasons. What we did on this one is we looked at the various RFPs that have gone out throughout the country, and it was really kind of difficult because each of the bike share programs have been implemented in various ways. A lot of the procurements that went out went looking for equipment, so vendors and operators at the same time. So there were very few that actually went for vendors first and then operators later. And in fact, a lot of times, like by way of example, Fort Worth, you'll see the transit agency actually went out and they were going to do the work in-house, and then later they spun off. So the transit agency, the comparable to our Sun Metro, they went out and purchased all of the equipment, and they were going to handle it in-house. In the end, they actually went with a nonprofit to do the operations, and they basically spun that nonprofit off of their transit agency. So I say that only to say there's not a lot of history of agencies doing an RFP strictly for operations, but the ones that we found that were somewhat similar to ours is how we came up with a 30-30-40. So what we did is we looked at the procurements that looked at at vendors and operators and focused in on the operation side and what are the areas that they were focused in on. What are the operational minimums and that sort of thing. And that's what guided the document. And then from there, the scoring really was kind of taking all of those and trying to blend it into something that fit here. I think in the end here, we didn't have the ability to provide a lot of score for experience because it's such a unique program in terms of what we're asking for. So obviously we want local participation. We're interested in the local bikes coming in and showing what they can do. So we couldn't offer, or we couldn't say experience is a
30% on its own.
right. So that's kind of some of the background.
I like that. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Parker has a question.
Mr. Tejas, I don't mean to belabor the issue. However, I'm curious, does the program anticipate the ability to use debit cards or prepaid cards?
So we're working that out with the vendor right now. Our concern is if debit cards are permitted, if gift cards are permitted, all of those cards that are associated, then we're left exposed. So we've asked the vendor to explicitly exclude those.
I'm just a little concerned that there is a number of our goodly number of our population that don't have credit cards, and we need to address that as well.
Well, so that goes back to that security issue. I'm concerned about a bike being checked out and not having the ability to reimburse ourselves for a lost bike. Now, again, we'll have GPS. We can likely find it, and likely, assuming there's no shenanigans with the GPS equipment. But it really goes back, and so I guess my point is it really goes back to a security item. But if I receive direction from the board that you want to see debit cards and gift cards made available, then we can certainly look at that as well.
Well, another possible alternative is we take a page from Mission Impossible and have them self-destruct if they go outside the city
Right.
limits or across the border.
We'll geofence
However,
it. And
I think the insurers would not like that. But I really would encourage you to consider the population where you're planting this and making certain that we make it available to as many as is possible.
Yes, sir.
Any more questions on this?
So with that, then the timeline as proposed, if you look there, we've got the RFP being issued in late June this month. Questions will be due in early July. Our answers will be provided in mid-July. Proposals will be due in late July with a contract award in August. And again, proposed approach is 30%. Experience, capability, and capacity would be 30%. And of course, that is a blended approach because of the fact that we are interested in seeing the local bike shops and what they have to offer. And then cost proposal is 40%. I would mention also a major component of this, as I touched on before, of the $720,000 budget that we've got, $400,000 will go towards capital expenditures. $320,000 will go towards operations and maintenance, early year operation and maintenance. This, much like transit, doesn't pay for itself. So you need additional funds in terms of memberships and daily checkouts, with the sole exception of the City of Austin because of South by Southwest. And it turns out actually South by Southwest covers their annual budget, which is pretty unique, and that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world as I understand it. So anyhow, it's important to note because one of the major components of what we will be doing once this thing is launched is actually looking for sponsors and looking for agencies and entities that want to put their name on the bikes, whether it's the front basket, whether it's a side basket, whether it's elsewhere on the bike or on the bike stations themselves, so they could brand it, much like City Bikes in New York, something along those lines, whether we have a major sponsor like City Bike or each of the bikes, say, for example, an individual could come in and sponsor 5 bikes for X dollars. So we'll have a major component of this program as a sponsorship availability to help offset the future operations costs. So that's a major component.
Mr. Tejas, how is the Mobility Authority going to be reimbursed for your time on this?
So this one, the 320,000 in operations will cover all of the expenses. The RMA's time in terms of my time will likely just be from our existing operations. So I don't intend to pull out of the 320 for my time. But we are using the GEC in a management role on this one as well. Their time will be billed 100% to the 320.
Well, my concern that I'd like to share with the board that is related to this issue, look, there is a move by one of our legislators to get the Texas Department of Transportation to waive the tolls, okay, on two of our major projects that would basically cut our revenue stream or eliminate our revenue stream. I think it would be important, and that'll be up to the board, not to me, that in the future, we're going to have to build a component in on each project for your time so that we don't get left. What we don't want to happen is at the end of the day, we have these programs and no monies to operate them from the Mobility Authority. So my concern is the Mobility Authority, not that we make money, but that we have money, we have the funds necessary to continue operations. So I think it's going to be important as we go forward, and I think maybe, I don't want to speak for the board, but there needs to be a component in there, a charge on any project going forward to reimburse the CRRMA, either if it's a one-time charge or an ongoing management charge to help administer the program. I'd like to hear any comments from fellow board members. Ms. Hiner?
I'll echo that. I would like to take things a step further. I mean, some of these are pass-through programs and we're made whole, but I'd like to see some revenue-generating component in as many of these projects as possible. When I look at this and you talk about getting a sponsor, you know, I think of mobile billboards and how people pay for a mobile billboard. That's what this is. Is that something that's ever been done in the city where they're actually selling advertising maybe at a station or a bike? I mean, we need to start thinking about building enough capacity in the RMA so that we actually have a fund that we can take on projects that we're interested in rather than just taking somebody else's on. So if you, that's something, but I am concerned about that as well.
And I agree with all of those comments. And I should mention, the intent was that the RMA not pull from the 320 that's currently available, but if and when the sponsors come online, I think the RMA it's appropriate to receive the administrative reimbursements from the sponsorships that come in. My only concern is 320 is all we have today. Unless and until we get sponsors, this program is going to have a short run. So I don't want to pull my time and admin for my time on it at the detriment of the program currently. That's however,
you bring up a very relevant point, and I don't want to belabor this because I know we've got other items to discuss, but if this program has a short life, what happens to the bikes and the stations? I mean, I'm concerned if this is a one-time funding item, I'm a little bit concerned about us going in and getting contracts and vendors and purchasing these. So what happens to the program?
Well, so maybe I shouldn't have made it quite as doom and gloom, right? I think ultimately the capital expenses will be completed, and those are granted funds. So those bikes and kiosks and stations will be owned by the RMA, and that'll be complete. The only issue is the operating expenses. So, and I'm confident that once we roll this out, we'll be able to bring on sponsors, much as most, if not all, of the other programs have throughout the country. So I'm not worried about it, but before we get the sponsors online, I'm a little hesitant to take funds out of the existing operation budget. Does that help?
Ms. Hiner?
Is part of the operating expenses, are you including insurance, liability insurance? Somebody's going to
Yes.
fall. Okay, so we would be protected in that. We
Yes.
wouldn't have any concern. Thank you.
One thing I'd caution you on is opening the Pandora's box of advertising. I think you'll kick a tar baby there, perhaps. That's my opinion.
I don't know what to say with that one. I mean, ultimately,
Metaphors.
and I hear that. I get that. I think the problem, though, is much like transit, without advertising and sponsorship, there is no revenue stream. Unless we were to actually go to the MPO and ask for a steady revenue stream, or the city or county or somebody else, I personally would prefer to see the sponsorship approach because you're not reliant upon a governmental agency. But again, this is at your direction. If you're interested in not seeing sponsorship, but rather, or perhaps a sponsorship from a governmental agency, we could explore those avenues as well.
Just one question. Other bike share programs utilize the advertising
Yes.
method to supplement and to really, that's their revenue stream. So it's been successful in other communities as
Yes, ma'am.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, as I mentioned, the City of Austin is the only one that doesn't need sponsorship, but because of their memberships and usage, their rates are so high they actually cover their operations, but they also go after sponsorship.
Go ahead, Mr. Tejas.
Okay. So 30, 30, 40 is what I'm proposing on the bike share program. This last one should be much more brief. As you'll recall, all RMAs throughout the state are required by state statute to have annual audits of their books. And every 4 to 5 years, we go out with a procurement for an audit group. And the last time we went out was in 2011. We were asked, or by the former chair actually, we were asked to go through another procurement process. It was about that time. So this is an update on that. So back in 2011, Clifton Larson Allen was secured through a request for qualifications, and they have provided the last 4 audits. And you'll recall they came before us after the last fiscal year. These are the areas that we'll look at for evaluation. This was really basically taken from the prior RFQ. I think it really, and this was developed at that time through the assistance of the City of El Paso and their financial group, because they obviously have very similar audit requirements as well. So we've taken the one from 2011, updated it a little bit, cleaned it up, and tweaked it to match some of the unique new projects that we've developed and that sort of thing. But the areas that we're looking at here for this RFQ would include general firm information, firm experience and qualifications, proposed personnel for the assignment, Texas presence and DVE utilization, and conflicts of interest. Those are the areas we'll be looking at. And for the timeline on this one, you'll see all of these kind of overlap each other. Mid to late this month, we'll actually issue the RFQ. The questions from any folks that are interested would be due in mid-July. Our answers will be provided in late July, and the proposals will be due in early August with a contract award in mid-August. Now I'll mention, I should have mentioned this with each of the others. These are the intended timelines. They may slip as we get into this, as you know, sometimes these things slip, but that's, and they're all very aggressive timelines, but that's what we're shooting for. In terms of the scoring, this scoring is identical to the procurement that we released in 2011, which again was developed with the help of the City of El Paso. And we're looking at 25% for the general overview of the firm in terms of the personnel, who they would use, that sort of thing. The audit experience of the firm is at 50%. We think that's particularly important because of the unique nature of the RMA and what we do and how we do it. Everything that we do is very unique in terms of financing and structure. So we need a firm that is capable of handling a unique entity like us. And then lastly is the approach, the capacity, and the capability of the firm at 25%. So unless you have any questions there, I'll go to the requested action items of the board. So what I would ask is for motions to approve board resolutions to authorize the executive director to issue procurements in line with the scoring criteria outlined in this presentation for the janitorial and security guard services required for the Tornillo Guadalupe Port of Entry, the operator services necessary for the El Paso Bike Share Program, and the professional auditing services required of the RMA.
I move to approve, as stated.
Thank
We
you.
have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes. Ms.
Just say
Yanier?
one thing, Raymond, if you could do something for us and look into the Paso Norte Health Foundation just funded a healthy living, active lifestyle component to their program, and there is quite a bit of funds, and I think that that might be something we could tap into for the bike share.
It's a really good.
Absolutely.
That's a
So
great idea.
we've got a running list, and I think we
Yeah.
may have them, but if not, it'll be added
Give
for sure.
Myrna a call.
Community
I think this
Foundation
fits
is
right
another
there.
group.
Yeah, I'm on
Absolutely.
that board, so if I can help.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I have.
Okay, item number 6, update, discussion, and action on board resolutions to authorize the executive director to execute the following instruments as they relate to an agreement for toll system integration and maintenance with Telvent USA LLC. A, change order number 3, booth cameras at the Tornillo Guadalupe Port of Entry. B, change order number 4, roof work at the Tornillo Guadalupe Port of Entry. And item C, consent to assignment of the agreement for toll system integration and maintenance from Telvent USA LLC to Schneider Electric Mobility N.A. Incorporated. Mr. Tejas?
Thank you. For this item, we actually have representatives here from the Telvent group, so if any questions come up, please let me know and we can bring them to the podium. So these 3 items, as mentioned, deal with Telvent USA, who is the system integrator for the RMA. And really what that means is they're the group that's responsible for the planning, designing, installation, and operation of our toll collection system. And as you know, that toll collection system not only includes the Cesar Chavez managed lanes, but also in time it will include the Border West Expressway toll collection system, and currently it also includes the Tornillo Guadalupe Port of Entry. So when I mentioned earlier under item number 4 that we had actually planned, designed, installed the toll collection system at Tornillo, it was through Telvent that we did that. So what you'll note under item 6A is change order, and actually let me touch on our relationship with Telvent. We have a master agreement, and each time we have an additional project come up, we issue a change order. So change order number 3 is actually at the request, and in fact number 4 is at the request as well of the County of El Paso. They've asked for additional booth cameras at each of the booths there at the Tornillo Guadalupe Port of Entry. That's change order number 3. And that's an additional cost to us, which is passed through to the County of El Paso at $8,619.54. Item 6B then is change order number 4, and this again was at the request of the County of El Paso to assist with the repair of certain overhead structures there at the booths in the toll facility. This is an additional cost of $32,812.27. Again, this will be passed through from the RMA directly to the County of El Paso, and you'll see on this one as an exhibit there is a design drawing which gives you an idea as to what they're looking to do under item 6B for change order number 4. Then lastly, the Telvent group, now I may ask the Telvent folks to correct me when I go wrong. Telvent was owned by a parent company that was sold to Schneider Electric. Through some reorganization, they are actually looking to assign the work under Telvent USA LLC to Schneider Electric Mobility N.A. Inc. So you see the documents provided as backup to item 6C. So we're looking for approval of a consent to assignment of the agreement from Telvent to Schneider Electric Mobility N.A. Inc. So subject to your questions, I would ask for approval of all items 6A, 6B, and 6C.
I have a question.
Ms. Hiner? No, go ahead.
Raymond, on 6C, on the assignment, generally you see in an assignment some terms that specify what happens to the contract or the obligations that preceded the assignment, who's going to be responsible. What is the situation here? The letter's pretty basic, and it just says we're assigning. What happens if we have a problem for something that occurred before the assignment? Or is that entity still exist, or are we able to kind of look to Schneider for, after and before kind of issues?
So my understanding, we had Lock Lord look at this, and they actually sent back a provision that I believe addresses your concern. And the intent is to cover any and everything that Telvent was responsible for would be now responsible by Schneider. It's the same
Okay.
group, same people, same everything. They've just realigned their.
I just don't want to get into it's a different company, but if our attorneys looked at it and addressed that, then that addresses my question. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions from the board? Can we take them all as one item,
Okay,
Mr.
Yes.
Tejas?
I'll move to approve 6A, B, and C.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes. Okay, item number 7 is discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute work authorization number 26 with Atkins North America as the CRRMA's general engineering consultant for services on the El Paso streetcar project through commencement of construction.
So as we discussed at the last board meeting, the intent with the construction component of the El Paso streetcar project is really to take a blended approach where we would use the URS Corporation, which to date has completed all of the design work, the environmental work, and they're managing the procurement of both the vehicle side and the infrastructure side. They've done all of that work to date, so there's a vast amount of knowledge in that corporation. So we want to use that. We don't want to lose that, but we also need the independence of a third party to come in and do the construction management since URS completed the design. So in the event there are issues between the design documents and the contractor, we want an independent third party overseeing all of that. In addition to that, at the last board meeting, the board expressed a desire to have the general engineering consultant actually serve as the program manager as well. So what you see before you today as item number 7 is a work authorization, and as you'll recall, our agreement with the general engineering consultant has a master agreement. Each of the projects we assign them is through an individual work authorization. So work authorization number 26 then is to bring the GEC on board as soon as possible so that they can become familiar with the design documents, the procurements, everything that's happened to date, so that once we select the contractor to develop the work, to actually complete the rehab of the vehicle. I shouldn't mention the vehicle because the vehicle will stay on the URS side. But once we bring on the construction contractor to commence work on the infrastructure component, the construction manager, in this case, the program manager in this case, which would be the GEC, will have already been brought up to speed. So what you see here then again is services that are required to bring them up to speed, to get them plugged into the procurement, to get them plugged into the design so that once the procurement is completed, they'll be ready to serve as the program manager and specifically the construction manager. I'd mention, as with all work authorizations, this is a not to exceed amount based on hourly rates built into the exhibits. So while you see the amount is not to exceed up to $440,000, the actual will likely be less than that based on the services we request as we go through this. So subject to your questions, I would ask for approval of this item as well.
I have questions.
No, go right ahead, Ms. Hiner.
Raymond, and I've only been to a few meetings, so maybe I'm missing something, but my understanding is that GEC would be overseeing the construction, which I agree with as being a separate party. Here, you're introducing them in the design process, is what I'm reading, essentially.
Sorry, so let me correct that.
Okay.
They're being plugged in to the design process, not to tweak it, not to take over design, but to understand what the design is, so that once it's awarded, they can hit the ground running. Does that make a little more sense?
It makes sense, but I still have the same concern. I mean, this is a lot of money, first of all, to just be kind of hanging out, seeing what's being done. And I don't know if that, in effect, takes away the independence that we need during the construction phase if we have them plugged in, if you will, I think that was your term, during the design or program management part of it. Generally, I just haven't seen that before. You generally bring an independent construction manager during construction, and the design happens kind of by itself. So I don't know about that. I don't want to have finger pointing. I don't want to have that. I want to have the design team being responsible for the design, and then having our independent consultant during the construction. So I'm a little concerned about this, just from are we just blending too much too early and really not benefiting from what I thought the intent or what I was comfortable with is the independent construction oversight.
Okay.
I don't have the history in this, but that's just one of the things that's coming out to me.
Certainly. Okay, so let me address it. I think perhaps my use of the term plugging in was inappropriate and doesn't really cover what I'm intending by this. The intent really with this work authorization is to get the GEC team to understand what the design documents say, not to revise them, not to take ownership of them in any way whatsoever, because ultimately the program manager and the construction manager side of this, their role will not be to do anything other than to hold the construction contractor to what the design is. Now, if there's a conflict between the design that has been provided to the contractor and what the contractor can do on site, that's where the construction manager comes in and negotiates that. They don't have any ownership in the design. They will not make recommendations on the design. They will simply be reading through and getting familiar with the documents. Does that help?
That helps a little bit, but that's a lot of money to just look at a plan and see what it says.
Well,
in my opinion.
you normally don't see this because you have your construction manager online way before this, right? So in other words, you generally, it's certainly not on a project of this size, you wouldn't bring on a construction manager on the day that you sign the contractor, because you want the construction manager on day one to understand what the project is, so when they receive the documents from the construction contractor, they understand what they are, they understand if it makes sense, they understand that the timeline will or won't work because there's something buried in a sheet way down in some other section, right? So you need that deep knowledge and understanding of the program before the contractor is brought on board. So that's why we're doing this. What makes this unique is that normally, like if we were the city of El Paso, you wouldn't see this coming before the city of El Paso because the engineering department they've been involved managing the design firm since day one. So because we never used the GEC before, that's why we're plugging them in here now. So again, I guess 2 points there. Bringing them on board when we bring on the contractor is too late. And without them, we don't have the independence, and more importantly, we don't have the knowledge base to manage the construction contractor when they're brought on board.
Okay,
I
thanks.
hope that helps.
No, no.
Any other questions? Okay,
Move to
Enter-
approve.
we have a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any against?
I'm to vote against. I'm not comfortable with this.
Okay. Motion passes. Number 8, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute a local project advance funding agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation for FM 3380 Manuel F. Aguilera project.
So this one's a unique one. This is part of the 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan, which consisted of a little over $400 million worth of transportation projects in the region that were identified as priorities by the County of El Paso, TxDOT, and the Regional Mobility Authority. In this particular project, this is one that the county had been working with TxDOT on for many years, and the agreement under the 2013 CMP was that the County of El Paso would pay for TxDOT to complete the construction of the project. If I remember correctly, TxDOT was responsible for completing the design documents, which they did in-house, and the construction component was to be paid for by the county. Through the CMP, as you'll recall, the County of El Paso adopted an optional vehicle registration fee, which was then assigned to the Regional Mobility Authority. The RMA then went out and used that pledge of assigned vehicle registration fee revenues and issued $72 million in bonds. And then this is the next step, to utilize the vehicle registration fee bond proceeds to pay on the county's behalf to pay TxDOT to complete the construction of this particular project. So what you see then is the draft document, which is the voluntary local government contribution to transportation improvement projects. TxDOT uses forms for most of their agreements. This is a unique one in that it's actually the local government providing all of the construction dollars. So what you see in here is some of the general boilerplate, but then at the end, you'll actually see under Section 19 additional provisions, items A, B, C, D, and E, all of those were provisions that were built into the assignment agreement from the county to the RMA that they wanted to see pass through to TxDOT. So you see in there, as an example, the county will retain the ability to go visit on site and see how the funds are spent. They can audit. They can do all the sorts of things that you would expect a funding agency to keep or would retain of the entity that receives the funds from them. So this is a unique one in that the RMA's role in the Aguilera project is simply to pass the vehicle registration fee bond proceeds from the debt issuance that we had to TxDOT. There's no expense to the RMA in this one, and I believe no oversight either, so there should be no time spent by me on this one, which is a good thing. So subject to your questions, I would ask for approval of this item as well.
I move to approve this one.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Number 9 is discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the vice chair to execute an interlocal agreement with the County of El Paso for the Camino Real National Historic Trail Sign Project as a project to be funded by the county's vehicle registration fee.
So this one is also a unique one as well. This one is not part of the 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan. However, the County of El Paso has identified it as an important project for them, and they have actually identified vehicle registration fee proceeds from the bond issuance that the RMA has issued. They want to use us. The county has asked the RMA to complete the project using the vehicle registration fee bond proceeds. So the project itself is actually a completion of the National Historic Trail that the U.S. Park Service has developed. It's actually a trail that runs from, I believe, Mexico City up to Santa Fe, the Royal Road it was referred to. So what it really amounts to is signage. Those, you've likely seen them along the highway. They're brown signs, and they show historic locations and that sort of thing. So there's a whole slew of signs that are being proposed by the National Park Service, and the county is asking that the RMA manage and construct the project using vehicle registration fee funds. So this agreement actually authorizes the RMA to utilize the VRF funds. This is basically the county blessing the RMA to utilize the funds to complete the project.
So does this bump another project out?
It does not. In fact, if you recall, probably 3 board meetings ago, the county actually realigned the funding sources and the approaches because of the Attorney General opinion that came out that was adverse to TRZs
Right.
adopted by counties. When they realigned their funding sources and approaches, there was additional funds available, and this is one of the projects that they brought on. And in the coming months, we'll likely bring on another project, which I believe is the Greg Edgemere project, which they have additional VRF funding for that they'd like to see utilized for that additional project. And that's why this is a unique one in that it's using VRF funds, but it's actually not part of the 2013 CMP.
Okay. Any questions, members of the board, on this item? The county's requested it. They've allotted the funds, the costs passed on, so this is a formality on our part, correct?
Well, we're tasked with developing it.
Right,
So,
but I mean, we've got,
but yes, sir. This is required in order
they've
for us to
approved the
access.
amount and everything else, so,
Well, now this agreement hasn't gone before their commissioner's court yet, but it's the exact same form as all of the other ones have. So we don't anticipate any issues. Now, of course, if they have substantive changes for some reason, of course, I'll bring it back to you all.
how many signs is involved in this project?
It is a
Or our,
lot.
excuse me.
Close to 100.
It better be for $1.5 million, so,
Yes, sir.
okay.
And actually, we've partnered with TxDOT to identify those projects along the route that they have open. So we'll develop the signs and we'll provide it to their contractor to place it. So there are some cost savings along the way that we're hoping to realize.
Okay.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes.
Subject, I think that's it for our agenda. So subject to your questions, I think we're done.
Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn today.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting of the Camino Real Mobility Authority Board, Regional Mobility Authority Board, is concluded at 9:10 a.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pretty good. Within an hour.